Oh, we're live. Hi, Suman. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, Grace. Great to
Uh,
be here.
awesome. Okay, so to start the show, I want to give a quick shout out to our um today's sponsor, and then hey everyone, I want to give a shout out to my friend Isaac and Pearl Talent. A friend connected me to Isaac when I needed help with some uh scalable operational work in my business. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect, and knowing overseas talent uh, is hard to do right. But Pearl came through and helped me find a great operator remotely. They have spent the last 5 years building a network of top graduates in the Philippines, giving hungry, high caliber hires opportunity to work with growing tech companies from C to Series D. The process was smoother than I anticipated, and then they have already placed over 200 hires from customer support, sales, finance roles, executive assistants, and more. If you're looking to lighten your workload and bring on solid talent at half of the cost of US hires, reach out to Pearl and mention I sent you for a nice sign up deal. Okay, to start the show, I would love for the audience to learn more about you. So, we bonded at the Majona after party slash dinner, and you have worked at like Citi Ventures as well as Intel Capital. And now you are at B Capital. What are some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career in venture that you kind of took to B Capital?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks again for having me. Maybe I will go a little bit farther back, Grace. Before doing venture investing, I had operating roles at Intel, at Symantec, at a health tech, and then started my career in banking. And I joined venture via Intel and Intel Capital, and I first kind of dove into enterprise software and specifically focusing on cybersecurity. And I had some background, but it definitely was drinking from a fire hose at the beginning. I think the big lessons I learned pretty early on, and I had some great mentors and managers who I was working with, who I remain close to at the time, was how important it is to to be able to organize this chaos of different technology shifts, understanding where things fit within kind of at the enterprise context, and how to interpret those trends kind of across all of these different dynamics as well. The better organized you can be, the more you can spot patterns, and the better you'll be able to develop frameworks and a point of view. And I think that was watching that kind of take place and understand how people built conviction was, I think, one of the most important things that you learn early on, and then you have to continue to hone going forward.
I love that. I wonder when it comes to since you mentioned about having the operator experience, I wonder, do you feel like from the technical diligence perspective or from like understanding the startup operational perspective, I guess how do you leverage like the back in time, the day to day kind of like work in the investing day to day?
Yeah, I think the first thing that it gives me is a lot of empathy for these founders, for these teams, um, and trying to run a business and operate it successfully, let alone starting one when you have other obligations, family, et cetera, and responsibilities, is incredibly challenging. And so I think the first thing that I get is a sense of empathy. I think the other thing that it helps me with is just giving me some insight into kind of leadership, team dynamics, and understanding you can, if you've been an operator, if you've been on the operation side, you kind of have a sense of like what high functioning teams look like, and in how they talk about metrics and how they actually get work done. And it's helpful because as an investor, you get kind of a view from the outside. Unless you're, moonlighting at the startup itself, you're probably getting some limited information. So I think it gives you some insight and a read on how things are actually performing, and if this team is really going to be high caliber enough to face the headwinds that eventually they'll face, and be able to navigate through that.
I love that. So I feel like I feel like empathy is definitely really important, as well as like seeing how like a highly functional team performing, like seeing how it works from the inside is really important. Maybe we could dive into a little bit more of your day-to-day at B Capital. So for the audience who may not be familiar with you guys, obviously you guys are a really big fund started by the Facebook's co-founder. And so why don't we start with like, what is B Capital for the audience who may not be familiar with, and what's your day-to-day like working at B Capital?
Yeah, so B Capital got started about 8 years ago by one of the co-founders of Facebook, Eduardo Saverin, an exec from Bain Capital, Raj Ganguly, and a veteran investor, Howard Morgan. Early on in the journey, they forged a partnership with BCG. And through that partnership, we're looking to add value to our portfolio companies through different engagement models and go-to-market kind of partnerships. And then from that time, the firm has gone on to raise about $7 billion. We have under management, and we're investing across a number of different sectors. I think it's pretty exciting to see that diversity. So I spend time on enterprise, but we also are investing in healthcare, in fintech, e-commerce enablement. We have some robotics and deep tech investments as well. We just launched a climate fund, and we're investing across geos as well. So US is a very large footprint for us, but we also have investments that have spanned Europe, Israel, and we have teams and boots on the ground in India and Singapore, and have investments in China as well. So what I love about B Capital is, one, it has tremendous global reach, and we are engaging with our counterparts and colleagues across the globe. We have in the US like meetings in the evenings and early mornings to kind of facilitate that coordination collaboration. The BCG partnership is really great as well, and I think the thing that I think sets B Capital apart from a lot of other firms is I've seen B Capital be really helpful to its portfolio companies, kind of over and above like some of the cap table, what you would read on the cap table itself. And I think that's something that we try to pride ourselves on in trying to bring whatever we have as investors and whatever we can leverage from the firm to help make our companies successful.
Totally. So since like I know that like you have a lot of great companies on your portfolio, for example, some cybersecurity company like Snyk or Starburst, and like Starburst is not a cybersecurity, but like I'm just saying in the B2B SaaS space. And then recently you made an investment in Lambda, like which is a GPU cloud company. And why don't we talk about overall what's your thesis in the SaaS / dev tool / infrastructure space, and what's your outlook for it?
Yeah. All right. That's a lot, Grace. Let me break it down. All good. All good. So had invested in Snyk at Citi, just to be clear, in here at B Capital made an investment in Starburst. We can, in terms of kind of the broader thesis, I spend a lot of time in enterprise infrastructure specifically. And the bigger thesis I think that we are seeing right now is really around how do we want to rethink the infra stack, what stays and what goes. I think especially in the context of AI, we have an opportunity to reimagine that. However, I don't think that transformation and change is going to happen overnight, and I think that we have a lot of incumbents who are innovating themselves in a way that makes them they will stay like pretty critical and relevant to the future story as well. So the thing that I'm really focused on is where that innovation is possible, where it's possible for that kind of green shoots to actually come up and thrive and build kind of a new way of how we are actually building tools, how we are building applications, building running workloads, models, et cetera. What are the new architectural forms that'll be required to enable that? and what are kind of the new modalities to actually engage with some of this technology. I think that we've seen chat be kind of a UI that has taken everyone by storm in terms of how we interact with these models. I think there are going to be many more new interfaces and modalities that are created, but applying that as well as kind of the analytics and AI horsepower to some existing use cases within infra, I think is going to be, where there is going to be great unlock. For instance, in how we are, threading together information to better detect security threats, how we are able to get to those root causes more quickly, how we can use agents to enable that remediation more easily, and so forth, and how we are able to interact with these models in a way that actually engenders trust, so that we can actually use them in some of these critical workflows as well. I think all of these are really important things that we need to be thinking about. And then we need to think about who has the right to win and determine that future as well. Is that be done by an incumbent, or will that be done by a new startup as well?
I wonder, I really like the last point you made, which is like, which part will be done by the incumbent and what can be done by startup. Why don't we start there on like, what are some opportunities that you feel like could be done by the incumbent and what could be done by startup? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. There are areas that I think are, if you look at, if you're examining a new product or technology, for instance, when we're thinking about, I don't want to name too specifically, but I think that there are definitely some areas where you question whether or not it would be more powerful if it's part of a larger platform. And I think those companies are building really important technologies that are definitely advancing that area, but they may not endure because they, are only going to be able to be as useful on a standalone basis, and definitely makes sense to be folded into a broader platform. I think you see folks like Databricks, Microsoft, and so forth, making acquisitions that are, kind of in that vein, that are accelerating their own roadmap and make kind of a 1+1=3 type of story. The areas that I think you have to understand are, very worthwhile for startups are ones where the dependencies on these platforms is a like more of a weak tie than a strong tie. I think that's going to be something that you have to understand. Like, can they be agnostic? Can they actually, thrive on their own? And what are, I think it's very dangerous to be innovating in the shadow of some of these innovative incumbents. And so looking for those spaces, which is really difficult as you're looking at kind of the pace of innovation of the foundation model companies and all of these other large platforms. It is possible, but there is so much manual work. There is so much effort that is spent on really, menial tasks. We see, our services industry across so many different use cases and functions are, I think, great and ripe for disruption there. And so I think there are plenty of white spaces, but you have to understand, if this is something that anyone asks themselves, why can't one of these model providers build it? It's just worth a second look to understand if that is something that will endure to become a really big company, which I think what the opportunity is right now.
I wonder, so you mentioned a really good terms of like not innovate in the shadow. My interpretation is like, not like a GPT wrapper. So like, what do you mean by like, what kind of startup do you identify as like not innovating in the shadow?
Yeah, I think there are really I think there are a lot of like really good vertical applications that I have already demonstrated that they can
Mhm.
build, like have used very, very domain specific knowledge and data to build a user experience that is transformative in that specific use case or vertical. And I think that area will continue to be incredibly strong because whereas foundation model companies could creep into those spaces, those are areas that, the buyer might be different. There might be more that people want to build into that specific area. Horizontal spaces, I think, can be at risk. So in terms of, building applications that have very horizontal use cases without being trained on very specific use cases or data. And the other thing that could be kind of a way to hedge against kind of the risk of being obviated, especially kind of maybe at the agentic level that's very horizontal, is thinking about how you can make it open for customization for that process to be redesigned, or even if it is very opinionated, for that to become so compelling in terms of its user experience that majority of the people in that market are excited to change and adapt to that. And I think people who are intuitive about how people work in those specific circumstances, be it IT operations, be it in billing, in the DevOps space, in the cyberspace, et cetera. There's so much that is outside of these like different vendor solutions in terms of the work that's taking place. People have good intuition about what that work actually looks like and why people work that way. I think they'll be able to build solutions that kind of can spark and catch fire in those different areas.
For sure. I feel like a lot of these areas definitely requires a lot like domain knowledge and experiences to build a solution that have like longevity. Um, I want to dive into Lambda. So that's like one of the big investment you guys recently made, and Lambda was giving the audience some context. Lambda was founded in 2012, and it is an AI infrastructure company that provides GPU computing solutions across multiple formats. And why don't we maybe dive into Lambda's product and business model to give the audience a little bit more context?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I love about Lambda was that it was built by AI
Mhm,
engineers for AI engineers. So
mhm,
they originally started out as a facial recognition API company back
mhm,
in an earlier wave of
mhm,
AI, got fed up with their AWS bill
mhm,
and decided to build out their own AI infrastructure, and then saw that there was a market need for it. And then began engaging the broader data science community, working with research institutes, universities by building AI specific
mhm,
notebooks, workstations, servers. Then they started their data center business and now have
mhm,
moved into cloud. Um, the I think that thread is incredibly important when thinking about this space. What we are seeing in AI right now is that it is very, very dynamic and changing on a month to month basis. And what is a common denominator is the compute,
mhm,
the infrastructure in which you need to build, train, run these models at
mhm,
scale. But what you need behind the scenes, but that building out that infrastructure is very capital intensive, requires a lot of like long-term bets
mhm,
in order to be successful and actually stand that up. But in order to actually be competitive in this market, you need to have agility. So how do you have agility when you're building something that is, heavy infrastructure that requires these like large capital outlays, and committing to certain types of hardware architectural decisions, et cetera.
Mhm.
And I think if you have people at the helm who understand AI, who are the ones, are playing with it, are engaging the community with it, they're going to be able to adapt and build for
Mhm.
that future more quickly and more and be thoughtful about kind of the architectural requirements and future proofing themselves in a way that really kind of helps in that regard. We see broadly the GPU infrastructure or AI infrastructure space kind of at the bottom of that stack as incredibly important. We've heard folks like talk about how the compute layer will be commoditized, and I think that I'm not afraid of that necessarily, because if you look at AWS, you look at Azure, all of these large cloud players have built enormous businesses on commoditized compute. And I think that the value right now that people are seeing is, maybe first as just kind of a reseller for NVIDIA, but these companies have the opportunity to build so much more, and they are, which is really exciting. In actually building out the technology layer and middleware layer to make running and deploying these models easier, to make building and doing inference much simpler and more turnkey, making it really bespoke for the needs of the data scientists. And so I think that's kind of the opportunity that they have in front of them to build kind of the next generation AI cloud business.
For sure. I want to quick saying hi to the audience. Hi, Scott. So I wonder when it comes to I feel like the key differentiator of Lambda versus some competitors is like number one is like the AI first focus. So it kind of like built specifically for like the AI workflow to optimize like storage, memory, and security architectures, and also the GPU access and like cost efficiency. I wonder like how do they sell to their clients? I wonder like what does a sales motion kind of look like? And since like I know that like one of the things I was like listening to the podcast the founder did with Weights and Biases. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but I feel like so what he said was like when they first started showing investor the product they were building were very hard to attract investor, even they are cash flow positive. But now like they're such a popular company. um what have changed during this time that like it became like a hot commodity? Obviously I feel like because of ChatGPT and AI became like a more popular or like mainstream domain that requires more GPU to build like different AI products. But I wonder if there's any other significant change that like people are kind of like missing or like didn't really see from the back end that have shifted the product or like the company to be more like popular as it is today.
Yeah, I mean, Greece, I think, so the macro demand for compute has grown tremendously. I think the other big thing that has been pretty instrumental in all of these companies'
Mhm.
kind of rapid scale and growth is that they're able to stand up, the latest SKUs from NVIDIA much more quickly, and without kind of the bloatware that you get on some of the traditional cloud platforms. And the users of that, the people who have that highest demand, in fact, are some of these larger platform players as well. And so I think that demand has definitely shifted the view. And the thing that's exciting about Lambda is that they don't only cater to the large platform players. They have like a huge customer base that spans enterprises, agencies, and regulated bodies,
Mhm.
as well as enterprises and other tech companies and startups as well.
Mhm.
And we really love the fact that they are offering, because they are able to provide AI infrastructure across so many different form factors, from desktops to data centers, colos, and cloud, with multiple different cloud products even. They're really able to kind of democratize that access, albeit there is still, the demand is still outweighing the supply. But as much as possible, however you want to consume the GPU, they are building towards that, which we're super excited about. And I think some of those things have been, as the market has kind of understood and appreciated that, I think has kind of changed things for them as well.
For sure. I wonder, on a high level, maybe not on a high level, but like in like a different detail level too. How does like the current, call it like AWS or something, monetize their cloud versus like the AI focused cloud company like Lambda does? As you mentioned, like maybe they are providing very detailed like specific services, no matter like how small or how big you are, to kind of catering to your needs. But what if like AWS or like other companies that will be doing the same, like what does that kind of like landscape look like? And then also there's also, in the competitive landscape, there's other companies that have been offering a similar services. And why do you guys like pick Lambda versus these other companies?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first of all, I think this is a huge category. I don't think that there's only going to be like one or two winners, which is great. I think multiple big companies will be created in this category. Looking at kind of Lambda against some of the cloud players, I think the big advantage is cost. They're right now the lowest cost compute provider. Two is around kind of performance. They have built their infrastructure for these workloads specifically. They're not adapting or kind of re-architecting something that exists and has been optimized for web applications, for kind of the for AI applications, and therefore they don't have a lot of other services or other kind of noise in the stack that could create some latency or less optimized kind of performance for these workloads itself. And I think those pieces are incredibly compelling. The fact that it's architected specifically for AI engineers and for AI workloads, as well as the fact that it is low cost, I think that in and of itself is really compelling. The other pieces that I think take it above and beyond that are the fact that they've built a Lambda stack, which is the middleware stack that sits on top of the compute, to be interoperable with any type of AI tool and framework that you're building with. And so you can bring your own tooling to Lambda, and it's a turnkey experience. And I think there are a lot of data scientists who really want that, instead of being forced to choose whatever is on the platform itself for a native experience. So I think there are a number of different things that make it a very compelling offer versus the hyperscalers themselves. And then among the competitors, and there are new players coming into this space, because I think people are seeing that there's a huge opportunity here. I think a lot of the different players have really interesting strategies going after this market. The thing that we get excited about with Lambda is that they're building, something that can be transferable across these different form factors, right? I think that's the having a unified experience, regardless of how you want to actually, use your compute for AI. I think is going to be something that gives them a lot of future proofing in going forward. And because they also have data centers, I'm excited about the fact that there's private cloud. There's a lot of folks who won't want to move to a cloud experience to do their AI, and those people have demand. as well. They're regulated entities. They don't want to move their data to the cloud, and they haven't, but they still have need for all of this latest and greatest tech. And so, large financial institutions, healthcare industries, anything that has a lot of, manufacturing, defense, all these places have kind of limitations on how they can actually, maintain and operate on their data. So they need solutions that are going to be, working for them too. So.
I've been taking notes. I wonder, maybe I have like a couple questions there. Like one is like, how do they maintain like a really low cost for people? I mean, I have other questions, but like maybe we can start with one. I'm trying to control myself to not ask like 60 things at once. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, the thing that the big, without getting into the weeds too much, on the cost side, I think what Lambda has, to Stephen's point, I mean, they have been doing this for a long time, for their own needs, and the entire motivation behind the company was to have a better experience at a lower cost. That's what they were building for themselves. And so it's always been at the heart of how they've been building their business. And so they run a really lean operation, and they've built the infrastructure so that they can actually offer the lowest cost. I think they actually increased their prices because they felt there was room to, because they were below market. It's just in building a business that is very, very capital intensive, and that is at this is not a software company with like 80-90% gross margins. This is an infrastructure, hardware, CapEx intensive business. Having operational, diligence and excellence is a necessity. So I think they've always come with that mindset and had, and I think are, because of that, are able to offer those types of prices and stay really competitive.
Totally. I want to learn more about, since you just mentioned they're like an infrastructure company, not a software company, like hardware company are typically CapEx intensive. What would be the technical moat there? Like, let's say for like to, I guess, like to keep them being successful in the industry. And in terms of like valuation, I feel like the hardware valuation has always been some sort of like mysterious part for me. Like, how do you kind of like I feel like not the Lambda case in particular, but I feel like a lot of the hardware companies are harder to make the multiple because of its capital intensive, and then people are constantly raising money to like, sustain the business. What's your thought process on like looking at the valuation in a particular market, or like in a particular company, to in the, I guess, like the hardware ecosystem?
Yeah, I think, Grace, at the heart of your question, or what you were starting to ask, was really around a competitive moat. Building a business like this is incredibly difficult. The moat is in the execution. The moat is in, building a platform that works, that is reliable, and that can scale, and that is, and that offering that kind of consistency and service is very difficult. And we have 3 big cloud players, and for a while it was really just one. And that, I think, gives you a sense of how challenging it is to actually build a cloud a cloud business like this. So I think the moat is fully in the execution, in that experience and so forth. I think it's not a feature. It's not like a one hook that I think as software investors we're used to seeing. And the moat for most companies, even software companies, is in how you execute, and making sure that the team that you have kind of behind the company is able to run fast and innovate into the future. And I think these guys are able to do that.
I wonder what's your thought process on like diligencing the execution part. I feel like from like outside, like whenever I encounter like a early stage business, a lot of it are lack
Yeah.
of data. So like, you know, you can only diligence based off like, you know, chatting with the people's past coworkers, but or like maybe chatting with customer to be like, hey, would you buy this? How would you kind of evaluate like a later stage business execution and like especially like having comparison to like similar-ish businesses?
Yeah, Grace. I mean, the benefit of looking at growth companies is you have data.
You have data. Yeah.
There's a lot more information that you can, sift through to help you understand,
Mhm.
is this a strong company, and what are the proof points. It still starts with a team, and understanding kind of their capabilities, and so forth. But you now have data on their actual performance, and looking at not just how they've grown, or how much they've grown, sorry, but how they've grown as well. How much have they had to spend to earn that growth? What processes have they kind of figured out? What playbooks have they built for themselves? How big of a team have they built? And what's the type of talent they've been able to hire and bring in? There's so many more questions that you can actually answer now that you have kind of seen a few years of progress of the company and market. So using a lot of those same kind of financial KPIs, operational KPIs, you're able to glean a lot from about the company's performance and ability to execute. The things that you're still going to be betting on is the future, right? Like, so as if you're investing on the growth side, on the early side, there's plenty of upside. On the growth side, you might see that, hey, the company has some proof points around product market fit, but how are they going to become that $100 million revenue company? Or how are they going to, become a $1 billion revenue company going into the future? Because you want to see them IPO at some point. And those milestones are very difficult to attain, themselves. It's not a given just because you get to 5, 10, 20, 50 million that you're going to hit, 100, 200, 500 as well. And so you are still kind of making a bet on that piece of it. And, there you can look at the past performance, but you then have to make some judgments on your own and some, have a point of view on, can this team actually get there? Do they have the energy reserves? Do they have kind of the ability to get, to fundraise, to be able to attract the best talent, surround themselves with the best people so that they can navigate those waters most effectively? And so that is those are the questions that you kind of have to focus on as well. Because once they've executed to a point, then it's the question moves to kind of the future.
For sure. I want to maybe like going back to like a little bit more of like the fund on the fund level. So like, Lambda is like a really big investment here. And how is the portfolio construction kind of look like from the growth stage fund perspective? Because I feel like for early stage to save for follow on, it's a lot easier as your font size is like not as huge, and like there's like a lot more, even for like later stage it's like not that much money, but like for growth stage I feel like it's a different thought process probably. Yeah,
Yeah,
what?
at the level, Grace, I think the thing that we think about on the early side, we're definitely setting aside funds for follow-ons. We do the same in our growth portfolio as well, and we actually have opportunities vehicles that enable us to double down on winners that we're very excited about as well. So there is as a through line, we are very committed to supporting our companies as they, grow through different stages. Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so I want to maybe go back to the general trends. So in the infrastructure space, so we just talked about like, the GPU cloud area. What are some other area that kind of excites you?
Yeah, I'm super excited about looking at some of these other infrastructure areas in
Mhm,
terms of how they can actually work with AI, and facilitate and enable it as well.
mhm,
So, in looking at security, I think one, there's an opportunity to really be kind of thinking about kind of not just a next gen SIM, which is kind of the system of record for managing your log and machine data to understand your different events and incidents and
mhm,
threats. But I think there can be a much more kind of multi-format data lake that is specific to security, whether that be in the
mhm,
data lake platforms themselves with analytics engines on top, or kind of bespoke solutions that are really incorporating different types of information to help you make better decisions. We're obviously seeing a lot of tools that are helping do that with the threat detection side, in helping automate SOC analysts, which is really great to see, and helping on the data privacy side as well by imbuing those detection models with context to understand what is sensitive, and how can we make sure we prevent those leaks. um, the areas that I think are still kind of ripe and opportune are kind of rethinking policy management. um, there's been a trend in security to move towards this concept called zero trust,
mhm,
which is basically saying, we want, instead of kind of having rules at the high level, such as like at the firewall, we want to validate and, instead of having trust for everything, we want to validate each request, each asset, each each login at that very granular level, to make sure that it can actually access a specific resource or perform a specific action or make a specific network connection. In doing that, in focusing on managing access at that very, very granular kind of asset level
mhm,
or entity level, is very cumbersome to manage. How do you manage the rules for that? How do you manage it's standardizing across that is really difficult, and you're going to be managing to exception. The ability, like AI and Gen AI, offers the ability to really collapse that policy management and have a much smarter, more intelligent, like adjudicator who can actually say, no, these are the rules. Like this is, like these are the rules that we're gonna, play by. I understand the primary intentions of the
mhm,
organization, what we actually need to follow, and I have a better way to manage some of these exceptions. And I think that power, I'm excited to see kind of that come into fruition as well. With the amount of AI generated content, there's going to be a need to kind of understand, what is, understand and mitigate against AI generated threats and attacks, as well as content that could be inappropriate or malicious as well. So how are we kind of managing that content, to prevent deepfakes or fraudulent authentications, and so forth. So I think there's a huge opportunity on the AI safety side, as well as improving the security and defense that we have as well. And then on the infrastructure side, there are so many opportunities to make infrastructure more intelligent. I think right now the ratio of developers to DevOps has, grown tremendously. It's so asymmetric and
mhm,
imbalanced, and the pressure to ship is, only growing higher and higher. And we've seen a number of tools that are kind of providing relief and ease to the DevOps individuals and processes. But there's a lot more that we could now do and kind of reimagine at that layer as well with AI. So I think that's pretty exciting to see kind of the automations, the architectures that can kind of enable us to build software at scale more easily.
I'm taking a lot of notes. So I want to, maybe we could start with the latest point, which is the DevOps. What's a major difference between the DevOps today in the AI era versus the past? So we've seen a lot of companies like Devin or the different co-pilots that kind of help developer to code a certain pieces, and then maybe people can piece them together. What would you say would be the core skills for people to code these days, and what kind of things that do they need to learn versus what are things that people will be building for the future, and how far are we when it comes to as a no code person or as a non technical person, we could write lines of code in English and then they kind of anyone could just generate the app for us.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So we made an investment in a company called Poolside, which is
Poolside is very popular too. They just raised Series B, right?
So we got to participate. B Capital got to participate. We're super excited about them, and I think they are building that future exactly. So I think that is that's the hope. I think there is a promise out there to actually make building software much easier. And I think the team at Poolside is really focused on building the models to kind of to enable that, to kind of go from augmented all the way to automated eventually. In terms of what that future will look like in terms of skill set, this is definitely in progress. I think the things that we're seeing on the ground are junior developers now have aids and help to actually enable them to write more effective, accurate code and more secure code as well, with all the co-pilots and so forth. But there still is a need for them to learn the fundamentals. So I think that is, still kind of on the developers, individuals themselves. Going forward, we can see definitely the type of developers that will be, building. I think the thing that's exciting is I think 80% of development work is actually maintaining existing code. So think about what you can do with some of that talent that's freed up now. What new things could they be building? How could they be, managing that software, at scale in a more automated way? So I think there is a huge amount of potential that's still available for individual developers, but now they have tools that help them get their ideas to production much faster.
I can't believe 80% of the development work are maintaining.
That was a stat that a while back when we were looking at some of these areas around helping automate legacy code. It's going to vary per company depending on what that legacy tech stack looks like. But if you think about it, as you guys are pushing new code, that existing code base continues to grow, and that has to be maintained. So at some organizations, maybe that work is 30 or 40, 50%, and at larger, more legacy organizations, that's going to be a bigger percentage of the work. So it really, that was a figure that we saw by one study. But yeah, it definitely is more than you think.
What does it mean to maintain existing code? Couldn't we just put it there and then code the new stuff? Or how will it be changed? So this is I was thinking, is this kind of like the bank? They save money in the bank and they grow your money.
Yeah. I think it would be great if we could build once and then it stay kind of frozen in time. But look, interactions change, the
Right.
how people are using the application, that load and that usage is going to change over time. The network requests, there are bugs and that kind of crop up as well. There are new features that added that have to be interoperable with older features. There are, architectural, and platform changes that happen as well. So the basic environmental drift alone requires, some attention paid to the existing software. So I think that, and then add any other changes that you're experiencing, that creates the work.
Yeah. I wonder on the bigger picture side. So since we just talked about like there is the system record for like, so basically there you mentioned about like the zero trust aspect. There is a security um aspect. There's rethinking policy management, and then there is managing deepfake. There's DevOps. Those are some big categories. What's the thought process of like, how big of each market is gonna get, and like which market you feel like would be most like money generating versus which one is kind of like harder to change, or like developer behavior is like already kind of so fixated on certain things, and like it's just like in general harder to be profitable.
Yeah, it's a great question, Grace, and one I think we have to kind of keep asking ourselves as we see these companies. And I think it is probably not great to have a very prescriptive view on that, because we want to be open to kind of seeing, having new categories be built. And so the thing that I think you have to really think about is not necessarily from that, like you can look at from that market perspective. If big companies have already been built in that space, that's a great proof point that there's an established market need. There are people who care about this problem, are willing to pay to solve this problem. There are budgets aligned. There are people who are trained to focus on this specific problem as well. And you kind of have that incumbent marketplace that's really easy to sell into. That being said, there are plenty of companies that are trying to create new categories. And I think the task ahead of them, while daunting, can still be really worthwhile. And so even though behaviors might be fixed in a certain way, and that's kind of, we've been building code and developing code in a certain way, this whole time. I think back when we, when we invested in Snyk, they were challenging the idea that security had to be something that developers thought wasn't a developer problem, and that they would only have to deal with after the fact. So the shift left concept was actually creating a behavior change, but it worked, and it was something that they understood there was interest, and there was a way to provide it to the developers that it didn't feel like that much of a burden. And I think that is the thing that is that we have to be thoughtful about. Is absolutely there are ways work is getting done across all of these different areas, but those founders, those teams who have kind of that insight into what parts of this work behave, like why are people working in this way, and what are like the different levers we can do to actually change and improve this, and what are people willing to do, is going to be kind of the opportunity to be able to push through some of those barriers and creating new categories. And so any of these areas can be huge markets, because we're building on existing problems and needs. So I think they all could be gigantic in their own right. It's really about being thoughtful about how to navigate some of the constraints within the enterprise, behavior, budgets, tech, et cetera. That'll be kind of the green shoot opportunities.
For sure. I wonder, I want to maybe double click on like the deep fake situation. So like I feel like there is a lot of companies that are solving deepfake from like the video, audio to I feel like the most popular would be maybe voice. So I wonder in that space, how do you understand the like I guess like the major problem people are solving from the fundamental tech perspective as well as so basically like how are people solving the problem of like um figuring out deep fake or like just like understand like how does the sales process look like to call it the bank or some other bigger organizations that are buying the software that
Yeah.
are
So I think, yeah, it's a great question. I think one as a societal kind of challenge, we're seeing kind of the damage that deepfakes can have, but a lot of that might be more from a consumer context, and I won't get into that side of things too much, but from an enterprise context, the place where this is probably most critical is around authentication. If stolen credentials and
Mhm.
compromised credentials is one of the easiest ways to get in and access an organization and break through its defenses. And people are using different means of authentication. Namely, I think voice has become pretty significant as an authenticator. That's a risk that where deepfakes could actually be really harmful. And so I think it's important to understand what are the what are the problems that are being created, but how does it actually relate to the situation for some of these enterprises. So when I was at Citi Ventures, we'd made an investment in a company called Pindrop Security, which was actually doing voice authentication and voice fraud detection.
Mhm.
This is a perfect use case for kind of these deepfake detection companies to really focus on. Because if we want to adopt new authentication modes and means, then we need to also be able to guard against, we need to be able to validate that this is the person.
Mhm.
In doing so, we need to, validate that it's not any other number of things, other people or bots or kind of other threats and actors and so forth. And so the better we are at detecting those other false identities, then the higher signal we'll have on that, that true authentication means. And so I think that's kind of the killer use case today. There are plenty of other, I think use cases that they can, build into, but the one that is probably most actionable and monetizable today is helping on the authentication and fraud detection side.
Mm. I want to be mindful of the time. I have one real question and a quick 1 minute fire round for you. So the one real question is like, nowadays a lot of people are saying AI could be helping startup build a lot faster with cheaper costs. People will not be raising later rounds or like will less require less capital to go for later rounds to build like a really successful company. And I wonder what's your take on that. And we'll dive into the fire round later. But
Yeah, that's I mean, that would be amazing. I think that's the future we're hoping for.
Mhm.
That these companies can be run much more efficiently because they're leveraging technology. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think building in that direction is something that we're hoping to see, expecting to see, and parts that we're already seeing, right? Because yeah, that is kind of what we're afforded. So I'll say that, but it still does require humans, at least right now, in some capacity to help, actually think of the solutions, understand the the challenges and so forth to build, manage, scale, sell these tools. So we're not all automated out of jobs just
Mhm.
yet, but we certainly can find some efficiencies going forward. And yeah, and I think the dollars dollars to value creation or the costs required to fund value creation are going down significantly. So I think we will see that trend. How quickly it happens, I think, is another question. But yeah.
I love that. Okay, so Women Far Around. So what's your favorite book?
My favorite book, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Made the biggest impact in my career? Great question. Yeah, I think some of my early colleagues from Intel, Ken Elephant, Neil Kirkray, I think they were, that was my first foray into venture. And I think they kind of shaped a lot of that for me. So yeah. And several way. Yeah.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? Alive?
It's your party.
Well, I still like Lin-Manuel Miranda. I think I just want to be best friends with him.
Where can we find you outside of work?
In the park with my dog.
Amazing. Well, Suman, thank you so much for coming on the show. And it was such a interesting and informative episode.
Awesome. Thanks, Grace. Great to be here.
Okay, let me quickly